an extremely outdoorsy female and love to spend a lot of time in nature. I spend the better part of my early 20s living in remote northern locations and exploring a lot of Alaska. I have many odd, frightening, and bizarre stories that came to my time in the north, and this is one of them. In the summer of 2012, when I was 22, I was living and working in a pretty remote town in northern British Columbia from May until September. The place I worked at was a campground and a park on the Alaska Highway, 4 hours north of Fort Nelson and 2 hours south of the Yukon, British Columbia border. The best part about this park was the fact that it had a beautiful natural hot springs which attracted tourists from all over North America every summer. I lived in an old trailer on a separate part of the campground where the rest of the staff lived. I quickly got used to living in a place where I had no running water, no electricity, no cell phone service, and no internet, and driving 4 hours to Fort Nelson every 2 weeks to get groceries and to do my laundry. Life was pretty sweet. I got to hike, go for late night dips in the springs, make some traveling friends, and spend quality time in nature getting to know the flora and fauna of the landscape. My job at the campground: park facility operator, gatehouse attendant, wildlife interpreter, and sometimes I had a few security shifts here and there. The feeling of living in the woods was much different than the feeling of living in a city as far as safety goes. In the city I'm from, there are people around. You are aware of the fact that your house or your apartment could get broken into, but emergency services are quick to respond and neighbors are also a plus. However, in the woods, I felt more vulnerable. The closest police were 4 hours away, and I lived in a trailer that was run down enough that it could easily get broken into. Plus, it was pretty dark and anyone could sneak around easily at night. I was already on edge sleeping every night. The trailer next to mine was abandoned by the previous manager of the campground after his son had shot himself in the head inside of it. The previous manager had promised numerous times that he would hire a company to drive up from Fort Nelson and tow the trailer away, but that never happened, and nobody seemed to care about it too much. I went into the trailer once, saw the blood and bits still on the wall, and never went in again. Back in the 90s, there was also a fatal bear attack at the hot springs. We all had to read the incredibly gruesome and detailed police report about it for our bear aware training. So yeah, unsettling to say the least. One night, at probably around 2 in the morning, I'm asleep inside my trailer and I'm woken up to a very loud banging on my trailer door. Reasonably shaking, I look outside the window next to my bed and see a car with its lights on and 2 men standing by my door. I can feel the blood drain from my face. This is the moment I've been scared of the entire summer. Through the door I say, "How can I help you?" And one of the guys, clearly hammered out of his mind, starts rambling on about something. No matter how hard I try, I cannot understand what he is saying. I say, "Sorry, I don't understand what you're trying to tell me." And the other guy starts frantically trying to explain something in the same drunken state as the first guy. I decide at this point that they don't mean any harm, and I open the door to talk to them. They look visibly shaken, and I can tell that they are desperate for my help, but don't have the mental capacity of a person sober enough to coherently tell me what's wrong. One of the dudes starts telling me a very long story that I managed to piece together through all his slurring and hiccuping. Basically, he says that him and his friend are on vacation, came up from Fort Nelson to party. They had a really long drive. They were at the hot springs. They were having beers. They were sorry about having beers. They weren't drunk. And then he drops the bomb that somebody is running around the campground, stabbing people. I look at the guy telling me the story. I notice he has blood all over his clothing. I say, Someone is going around stabbing people? And he replies, yes, someone's running around stabbing everybody. Then the other guy yells, come on, let's go. And they hop into the aforementioned car and speed off before I can question them further. Now I'm standing at my trailer door, in the darkness, alone, thinking there's a maniac running around wielding a knife. I have no phone, and I know that the only person who has a phone is the ranger, and his cabin is about a 5-minute walk away from my trailer. I remember that I have a radio, so I run in my trailer, lock the door, and try to get the ranger on the radio. His radio is off, of course. The only thing I can do at this point is to go to the ranger's cabin and notify him of the situation. I slip out of my trailer and run through the darkness across the maintenance ground, past the creepy suicide trailer, through a thicket and straight towards the ranger's cabin. Every single noise I hear from the surrounding forest is making my heart pound faster. I keep imagining this maniac sneaking through the bushes, entering people's tents, and slashing everyone like some bad horror film. I get to the ranger's cabin and pound on his door. He answers within a few minutes, visibly sleep-deprived, and I tell him the whole story. While I'm there, he calls the police, and they tell him that they are on their way and will be there in 4 hours. The ranger grabs his gun, walks me back to my trailer, and says, don't let anybody in. I stay up the rest of the night, listening for any sort of disturbance around me. The intense kind of listening where you are concentrating so hard on any external sounds that might be made that you almost feel deaf from the silence. After about 2 hours of doing this, my trailer starts rocking back and forth. I freeze. My heart drops. I can hear the sound of someone breathing extremely heavily, and I'm thinking, this is it. The knife-wielding maniac is going to murder me, and this trailer is going to be another one they have to tow away. I'm just sitting there on my bed, in my trailer, as it's rocking, waiting for the maniac to stop tormenting me and just break the window and stab me. I'm still listening intently to the heavy breathing, and that's when I hear a grunt. Very non-human sounding grunt. I get a feeling that it's not what I think it is, and I peer out of the window of my trailer, and a bison is scratching its back on the side of my trailer, causing it to rock back and forth. The RCMP get there at around 6:30 a.m. and proceed with their investigation for 10 hours. They close off the springs and the entire campground turns into an episode of CSI. We don't hear anything about what took place during the night until the investigation is over. Apparently, there was a guy at the springs who made a lewd comment about one of the females in another group, which resulted in an argument. The guy disappeared and returned an hour later with a knife, stabbing 2 guys in the group, and booked it back to Fort Nelson. Not before stopping at my trailer with his buddy to tell me about the incident, of course. Yeah. One of the guys at my trailer? He was the dude stabbing people. My guess is that him and his friends stopped by my trailer to try to make it seem like they were innocent. Drunken logic. The 2 guys that were stabbed survived, which is good. For many days following the incident, I was cleaning up blood-soaked clothing and rags from random places all over the campground. Knife-wielding maniac? Let's not meet again. Shortly after high school, some friends and I went camping one weekend. We drove to a national park which had a campground, but we decided to camp outside the ground so we wouldn't have to worry about making too much noise and disturbing other campers. We set everything up in a nice clearing next to a bushy slope, get a fire going, the moon comes out, and we crack open some beers. So far, so good. Around 10 p.m. we suddenly hear the sound of people walking downhill through the bush towards our camp. This puts us on our guard, but we weren't too concerned because it's a popular park and we figured it's just more campers making the most of the long weekend. We all keep our eyes trained towards the sounds, and soon enough the people arrive at the bottom of the slope. But they don't cross the tree line into the clearing. They just stop in a huddle, and it's hard to make out the details, but it looks like there's 6 figures. Somewhat oddly, all of them are dressed in white, and the moonlight, reflecting off their garments, give them an eerie glow. I can sense my friends are starting to feel as nervous as I am. My friend D tries to ease the tension and calls out to the group in a friendly way. "Hey, how's it going?" They don't reply. D keeps calling out to them stuff like, "We were just enjoying some beers here. It's a beautiful night. What are you up to?" They don't reply. Eventually, one of the figures emerges from the tree line and walks towards us. He stops just beyond the light from our fire and stands there, staring down at us. D babbles at him for a few seconds with more nervous banter, but the man cuts D off mid-sentence. "How long will you be here for?" he asks, really low and slow, so we can't make out his accent or tone, but he certainly doesn't sound friendly. We were originally going to camp for 2 nights, but I have a bad feeling now, for obvious reasons, and I blurt out, "Oh, we're not hanging around. We leave first thing tomorrow morning." My friends murmur in agreement, and the guy says nothing, but just keeps staring down at us. I notice his clothes in more detail now. As mentioned, they were all white, and the top was kind of like a loose, plain baseball jersey, only made from a thin cottonish material. This is odd, because the night is fairly cool. Cool enough that I can see the man's breath, and he should be freezing. But for whatever reason, he just keeps staring, and I can hear the other people from his group shuffling in their spot behind the tree line. Finally, the man speaks again. "You're leaving tomorrow." It's not a question. We all agree, panicking now. Yes, we're leaving tomorrow." Apparently satisfied, the man turns away and walks back to his group. They all start making their way back up the slope. My friends and I say very little until we can't hear the group anymore, and even when they're totally out of earshot, we speak in nervous whispers. "What the heck was all that about? Man, some people are weird." We try to chill out, get some music going, crack more beers, but we're shaken up now, and what's more, we can feel we're being watched. We think the group must be parked up the slope, somewhere, scoping us out. So much for a fun night of drinking and BSing. We're too wound up, and we end up crawling into the tents, where we spend the night bunkered down like mice hiding from a cat. We get up early and leave immediately. The whole time we're trekking back to the car park, we feel like we're being trailed. The sensation of being watched never leaves us. Once we're loaded into the car and on the road, we finally relax. "Man, that was some freaky stuff last night." We go over it all, kind of excited in a weird way, considering different theories, meth heads, occult, Satanists. But would Satanists dress in all white? It's almost amusing now that we're out of danger. We stop at the town nearest the park. It's a real hillbilly nowhere kind of place. Just a petrol station, a dingy-looking pub, a closed-down bank, and other retail decay. We pull into the petrol station for snacks, and the guy manning the counter looks like a bit of a hard-ass, but we had to chat a bit, and he's friendly enough. We tell him about running into some weird people last night in the park, and he's very interested in that. He makes us explain in detail what happened. After he hears our story, I expect him to laugh it off. But he doesn't laugh. He gets all quiet and narrows his eyes. "You kids are real lucky last night." And that right there is the scariest part of the story because he is a no BS cowboy type, and I can tell he is being deadly serious. We pay for our snacks and drive back to the city, never to return. My friend, who is all into prospecting and all, told me this once. His cousin was out camping at the end of some fairly remote logging roads not far from where I lived. He pitched his tent and was sleeping. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, he gets up to use the bathroom. For some reason, instinct maybe, he grabs his rifle and puts in 2 rounds, then heads out to the bushes. While out in the trees, he suddenly sees a light back at the camp. So he crouches down with his rifle across his lap and waits. 3 guys are gesturing towards his tent. 2 have shotguns. The third, a bottle of alcohol. One of the guys says, "We can just shoot him. No one will ever find his body if we hide it out here." At that point, my friend's cousin slips further back into the trees and waits for dawn. Come dawn, he heads straight out, not bothering to grab his tent and sleeping bag and a few bits of clothing and food. He reported everything to the police and went back with them, but his stuff was gone, and they never found the guys.